A reading from the Gospel according to St. John, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Babette's Feast. Have you seen that? It's not new. So it goes back to 1987. I had to look that up. 1987 when this movie came out. It's actually a Danish film, I believe. It's set anyway in the Danish rural countryside in the late 1800s, I believe. Sometime going back, right? And essentially, the quick summary of it is that there's this father who is a minister, and he's the founder of this pietistic movement, and he's got 2 daughters, and they live with him, and all throughout life, all these men want to go and marry them, and the father rejects them, and so they end up just staying with their father, taking care of him until he dies, and they grow up, never married, and living in this pietistic movement, which very austere, very, not a whole lot of expression of joy, those type of things. And one day, they get a knock at the door, and it's this woman, Babette, and she's there with a note from someone they know, and she's a refugee from France. Whatever's going on in France, but she's a refugee. And she says, I'm here, this person sent me to you, and I have skills to be a maid, a servant, and they say, well, we don't have any money to pay you. And so she says, well, I'll stay here for free. You don't have to pay me. I just need somewhere to be. And so they take her in. And over the years, they develop relationships. They get, she engages with the life of this pietistic movement and everything. And at some point, she tells the sisters, I'd like to hold a feast in honor of your father's, what would be his 100th birthday. I'd like to do a feast for you in your community. And they debate this, and eventually they say, well, okay, that's fine. And they get together with the rest of the church and they say, well, let's do this because it's gracious, but we cannot show outward expressions of enjoying this. Anyway, so they say that's fine. Well, here's the little thing that goes on behind the scenes is that Babette, her contacts in Paris, always got her a lottery ticket every year, and this time she won. She didn't tell the sisters that she won, so she won these 10,000 francs, which is a lot of money, and she sends it with somebody back to Paris to get all the things that she needs for the feast, creates this feast. They have this unbelievable feast set out for about a dozen people with food that they've never heard of, drinks that they've never seen, all sorts of things, and they enjoy it. And then she tells them afterwards that there's and the sisters are like, gosh, that was amazing. It was an amazing feast. Yeah. And then she tells them that, she had won this lottery and used all of the money on this feast. And they said, 10,000 francs. And she said, that's how much it would cost in Paris for such a feast. And they're just amazed. Today, we hear in our gospel about this wedding banquet, this feast. And we're familiar with this story, right? We've got this wonderful feast, and Jewish wedding rituals would take place over multiple days. And it was a big deal for the entire community. There's an issue of if you run out, there's a lot of shame for your family. How interesting that Jesus' first sign here seems kind of small, right? Jesus even says, what is this the concern of you and me? This is a wedding. This isn't about raising the dead, feeding thousands of people, curing the sick. This is about a wedding. Things are running out. And Jesus shows up. And I don't know if you noticed, but at the very beginning of our gospel, what day does he show up? The third day. Does that sound familiar? Like, 3 is usually pretty significant in Scripture. Does it remind you of anything else for the third day, Jesus showing up? Right? Resurrection, right? See, it's not so much about the wedding that matters. John is actually, his entire gospel draws everything together, right? A colleague of mine, Reverend Tim Seitz Brown, had this quote that he had posted this week about this reading. He said, John gives us hope that when we think the party's over, the real ultimate wedding banquet begins on the third day. John is already looking at the resurrection. John already knows the story. He knows what's going to happen. Everything is pointing towards the resurrection. And this is a consistent theme. The Old Testament is full of wedding imagery and banquets and feasts. Right? We've got Isaiah 55, come all who are thirsty. Come who have no money, come and feast. Isaiah 25 talks about a lavish banquet. Psalm 23, preparing a table. My cup overflows. Ezekiel 34, feed them in a good pasture. Scripture is full of feasting. It's been said that Jesus ate his way through the Gospels. God is a God of feasting, of abundance, of merriment, of joy. As we heard also in our Old Testament reading, there's a lot of language between of God and Israel in kind of a marriage language, right? We get that in our reading today. We're also told that this is the first of signs, I can speak, the first of Jesus' signs. Now, some scholars will say there's 7 signs, and I'm not going to go through them all. We'll end up hitting them as we continue on with this throughout in the coming weeks. 7, another significant number. It's like the story of creation each day. And then there's an 8th sign, which is the resurrection. And the interesting thing in John's gospel is that when we get to the end of John's gospel, you get to chapter 21, after Jesus is raised, that 8th sign, what happens is they're on the beach and they have another feast. Jesus is always providing. Jesus is always coming and providing and celebrating. We've experienced a variety of different feasts and celebrations and banquets in our lives and in the life of our congregation. Many of you have served the when Project Share was doing their holiday meal, serving at a banquet. Long time ago, I used to work at Project Share and put that meal on. And it was a big effort, and there was lots of food, and it was this great celebration to be able to invite our special guests to be able to come and feast on food that would not end. We've done this for funerals, for other events, congregational meals, picnics. We share a meal with the truck stop ministry, with dinner with friends, with people making casseroles and soups to give away. We've done this with midweek Advent and Lent services and more. Lutherans, if they're nothing else, are big on feeding. This is our big thing, right? And one other way that we do this every week in the Eucharist. Now, I know sometimes this can be really difficult because we're like, well, it's just a wafer and a little bit of wine or grape juice. But it's so much more. Why? Because it's Jesus. We encounter Jesus, the feast that continues to feed us. The beauty of the Eucharist is not in the bread and the wine itself, but in the fact that this is Jesus who comes and provides for us, who feeds us in so many different ways. In our lives, we can often feel like things are running out. And sometimes in very trivial things, sometimes in very important things. We can feel like we're running out of patience. We can feel like we're exhausted and frustrated. I mean, come on, this is almost 2 years now with the pandemic going on. I don't know a single person who isn't exhausted and frustrated, regardless of anything else. I mean, it's frustrating and it's sad to see people dying and being sick and seeing nurses and doctors being burnt out along with so many other folks. We are drained, and run out. Run out. And this is when Jesus shows up and gives us a sign to keep us going, because we can't do it on our own. Just like that wedding feast, they didn't have anything else to provide. They couldn't just produce anything out of it. They couldn't go down the street to the liquor store and get more wine. They didn't have the means to do it. It's only with Jesus showing up that they're able to provide. It's because Jesus does the work. It's because Jesus shows up in our lives when we are empty, when we are exhausted, when we're drained, that Jesus shows up, gives us what we need, turns some simple things into extravagant and unbelievable things in our lives. And that doesn't mean that everything goes away and everything is hunky-dory. It means that Jesus has shown up and he walks with us and is there with us and provides us what we need in ways that we never expect. That's the beauty of this story. It's a common story. We've heard it so many times, and yet it's a story that we need to hear, especially in the midst of which a time we are drained. Jesus shows up. It's the third day, and he provides. Thanks be to God.